Hello and welcome to Upstage Downstage.
With me, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And me, Stephen Rees, seated in a cheap seat. This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen, things we've liked and may not have liked, giving our complete unprofessional and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew, take a seat and let's raise that curtain.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing First Touch. We saw this new production at Nottingham Playhouse on the 7th of May 2022. This world premiere production by new playwright Nathaniel Price is a gripping and heartfelt drama about what it takes to fulfil your dreams. So Richard, what's it all about?
Clayton James, a young lad from Nottingham, dreams of becoming the next Viv Anderson and lands a professional contract at a First Division club. But life in the late 70s isn't easy for him and his family. In an era of racism and hooliganism, with the return of his former coach, Clayton is forced to confront painful memories of the past.
So with all that said, let's set the scene! So Richard, what was your first impressions of the set and the layout of this show?
When you walked into the theatre, the set had been made as a fixed piece of full stage set. It was a cascading staircase from the back of the stage all the way to the front, leading out into the auditorium, so the front row was actually faced with the actual stage and the set and the scenery right in front of you. So it was a very empty stage with a platform off to stage left, and also at the back of the stage there was a picture of Margaret Thatcher. There was a clock to show the sort of natural football game clock, and then there was a year clock at the top, which was the old sort of 70s style changing time clock that would have adorned any office or room in the 70s, really, because this production was set late 70s throughout the 70s basically. And there was just a set of railings at the back of the stage which would show a football ground railings, and at the back of the stage there was just purely a ladder and a radio. And you always saw at the front of the stage was some bags with what looked like just rubbish bags I thought had been left on stage, and because we saw it on the first night somebody had just left them and forgot to clear the stage.
Yeah,
that was something that eagle-eyed me spotted. However, they did end up using those pieces of prop, so at least it felt naturally placed.
Oh, you forgot to mention one spectacular thing.
I'll let you mention the spectacular thing then.
Oh no, I wasn't thinking about that. Okay, there was a great big net full of balls.
Yes, there was a big net full of balls in the middle of the stage.
Yeah, but that wasn't
the other spectacular thing was Clayton walked out onto stage with a football in his hand, played by Raphael Akawudike. He basically sat there in the middle of the stage throughout people entering the room, and if I remember right, there was 70s music playing.
Yeah, I think there was time period.
Yeah, there was just...
It starts with 1979, you see.
Yeah, so there was faint noise music in the background of just 70s music, just to take you to that 70s era. And at the back, one thing I will say, the whole stage around the performance area was adorned with a 70s wallpaper like you would see in any house, even through the 80s, because people didn't change the wallpapers that quickly. People lived with this crazy green and brown pattern, green and cream and a bit of brown, and it was very 70s, very of its period.
Yeah, the set was very impressive from the kick-off.
Yeah.
Do you like that?
Yeah.
That reference.
Yeah, I like that.
Some would say it looked striking.
Well,
Some were being a bit punnilingus.
Before we kick off, I would say that the stage was also covered in a green carpet that had a very 70s style patterning in it, but it was also to show that this was also a football pitch. So the whole stage was covered in this carpet, and yes, it took you to the era, but it was also for two meanings. It was about the...
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, I was trying to work out, was it some kind of lino, but it wasn't until I...
was it AstroTurf or something like that? We didn't really know, but...
On a closer inspection, it was carpet.
Yeah, I think at the interval when
I felt it or anything like that. I wasn't,
No, you didn't go for a stroke along it.
Oh yeah, I could have used my hands. I mean, obviously, that's the first thing you'd do, isn't it? Use your hands to feel it.
It's all about...
I mean, I just go in there and shove my face in it.
Well, exactly. Theatre's all about the full-on experience.
Exactly. As the story progressed and we got into the first scene and everyone came onto the set, how do you feel that the set was used?
I think every part of that set was used really well. And what happened as the first scene opened, all the cast members came through the audience and walked up onto the stage and then began the scenes.
Yeah, they marched on in as if they've come from onto the pitch.
Yeah, they came in through the audience. Because they came from the back of the audience and through, it made you focus more on the stage because they were making a purpose that they'd actually come from the seats, the benches on the football pitch where they'd been watching Clayton play his first football game, and then it started straight into the actual scenes of the production. The first part of the production opened with you getting to know the family, where Clayton fitted into his family,
all the connections between the
his
characters.
girlfriend, his family, his mum, his dad, his uncle and his little brother. And basically you went through this whole opening scene of seeing that progress and how they were very much in that time zone and in 1979. Then what started to happen throughout the first half of the production, using the set and what was happening behind, just to mention that the clock started ticking the minute the production started, as in to show almost like the countdown of the football game for first half and a second half. So that was the aim of that.
Yeah, they tried
clock.
to do it 45 minutes piece, didn't they?
They were trying to do 45 minutes each half, so it was very much linked to a football match. But then what happened is Clayton's original coach came back. So when he was younger, his coach came back to meet him in 1979, and what started to happen, you started to slip back into 1974, 5 years previous, which meant that the actual time on the year above the actual clock changed and rolled back to 1974, and then it rolled forward to 1979. So there was moments where it was just to keep you in pace of where you were in the production.
Yeah, going from one scene to the other.
Yeah, see,
it gave you a reference point as to whereabouts we are in the story, that this is not the next scene, but this is a previous.
Yes, and also the age as well of Clayton. It sort of took you back to when he was a younger person to a child rather than him being an adult now. So.
Yes, it yo-yoed a bit.
Yeah,
didn't
it did. Yo-yo. Yeah, to sort, but also some of the scenes mirrored each other to sort of show similar things happening, which we'll talk about more in the writing, I think. Scene change wise, there wasn't any.
Everything happened all on the same stage.
Yeah,
but because of the way the stage was laid out, every little moment or section of it was there for a particular scene.
It was zoned. It was almost like everything had in different zones became different parts of the production. So there's a flat performance area on the left hand side.
Why do you think they did that? What was that for? Is that
I think it was to give heights and different levels to the performances.
They already had that with the fact that the staging was done as a stadium.
It was probably to give them a more chance of moving more together rather than having to stand on different levels, maybe, and not always up and down those steps. That's probably why they designed it in that way, which I think it worked because it created another blocked area. And there was some scenes where Clayton sat in front of that, almost like it was another area of the stage. So it gave him the backdrop of a bigger area behind him rather than the steps every time. Particularly for some of the scenes later on, or because at one point it became the vision of it being a bed. And it gave that other blocked area that gave you more of an idea that it was a bigger space, just a separate space to the other.
I wasn't quite sure if it was used for the father's workplace, but then when other people went on there, I was then a little bit not confused, but I thought, maybe this is a space where this is their house.
Yeah.
But then the record player was used right at the back.
Yes.
So that
the house was almost the whole area, wasn't it, in a way?
Depends whereabouts they were.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we did question is a big picture of Margaret Thatcher on the wall, and we didn't know if that was going to get used or if it was just put there for political reasons.
Yeah, like a reference in because of what was happening at the time with pits and the steelwork and
the struggles
the
with
strikes
and the sort of
the unions and stuff like that. I did wonder because whenever something is on stage and it's just there, I expect it to be used.
Yes.
So when I also saw a net of balls, I knew somewhere along the lines they've got to be released.
Yes.
And so I was already getting anxiety because we were sitting pretty much close to the stage. And I thought, them balls are going to be flapping in my face pretty much soon.
We're going to get attacked with a torrent of balls.
Well, not unusual. However, in a stage setting,
it's probably best that we have a little bit of health and safety now.
Health and safety, exactly. Yeah. Which is why I thought that platform
clean up on the front aisle
was Exactly. Bit messy, all these balls everywhere. But I thought that platform was going to be there for collecting the balls for them to flow into.
Yeah, I think one of those things. I mean,
one of them pinball games.
Yeah,
they all kind of go around.
Yeah,
the
I thought
things
that
and
they
go
were
in.
going to end up under the stage at some point. Which
Yeah.
I will talk. I mean, we could probably mention that now.
Well, go for it. You know,
there was a moment when all the balls dropped.
Yes.
But we'll talk about why later on. I did feel that it became an issue in the second half where they were still left there everywhere, and they could have done with a trapdoor or something to get rid of at least some of them under the stage so that the stage became more manageable to use for the later scenes.
Yes, and going on this whole health and safety thing, with the balls then constantly being on set throughout Act 1 and 2 when they were released, because there was a lot of running about and jumping
There was
about.
One scene, I think, that they were running around
and they
the
were kicking
scene,
balls, they were flicking them up in the air and stuff.
It wasn't just that. They were trying to climb over them at one point, and you just felt for the cast a little, because you could cope with a few balls, but there was a lot of balls.
You can say that again, can't you, Richard? Look at him, he's going red in the face.
You can cope with a few balls, but you can't cope with a lot of balls at once.
Not in one go. Not in one sitting.
No, exactly.
Need a cup of tea first. Now, let's talk about the writing, and this time we can talk about symbolism.
Yes, definitely.
And let's start with the basket of balls.
Yeah.
Why not? They were clearly there from the very beginning. Now, it was very evident for me, knowing about symbolism, that I take from it that each one of those balls that was released by the coach represented one youth that he had abused.
Yeah.
Or taken.
The releasing of the balls also was Clayton's first sexual experience.
Yes, so when his balls literally dropped.
Yes.
Was that as well.
And the experiences that happened. Some of the content of this podcast, we are going to discuss some quite, I wouldn't say graphic, but it's a delicate subject.
Yeah, delicate subject.
Where things have happened in the 70s and have only been brought to light recently about the relationship between coaches and up and coming football stars. So I
didn't know anything about that coming into this show.
No.
But I'm well aware of the likes of like Jimmy Savile and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So for this kind of situation to be going on in sport as well, shocks me actually.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm not surprised by it. So with the release of those balls,
yes, it had a fun element for the audience. However, it meant so much more than just the releasing of balls falling everywhere on stage, and that
just shows the quality of the writing as well. That you can get good pieces of new writing where symbolism is understood and used.
Yeah.
But even more than that, it's not just used once, it's used to reference quite a lot of other things going on under the surface as well.
Yeah, and I would say for me, it was very
because
brave.
It was a coach that opened those balls as well.
Yes, it was.
So he was the one that took...
He took that to the first sexual experience. The first sexual experience of Clayton. It was actually the coach that took that moment away from him, unbeknownst to him in a way.
I mean, this is what we're getting from this. I mean, that might not have been set out when writing. We don't know, but that's how
it was portrayed on stage. I mean, one thing I would
otherwise,
say,
why would you have all them balls up there?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, one thing I would say is a big shout out to Nathaniel Price for his bravery for writing a production in this way, because it's a sensitive subject and you have to get the levels of sensitivity, but also you're going to see a production, so it's got to have the light and shade.
It's got to be entertaining because you need to entice the audience to come along on this journey.
It's got to educate but entertain.
Well, that's a clever way of writing.
It is.
You entertain people, and then you sort of they come away from it with a learned experience.
If you come away thinking or reevaluating something that you believe so many times, or if you come away with the thought process that I didn't look at that situation in that way, or I didn't think about that in that way, it makes you question things in life. And I think that's a valuable tool because it helps other people.
Yeah, if you come away from a production and then you've got questions and you're thinking about it, or it's moved you in a certain way, then it's really done more than its job of entertaining you. It's educated you.
Definitely.
But there's a fine line between educating you and patronising you on soapbox.
Yes, totally agree.
Lecturing, which we'll come on to later on.
Definitely. But overall, I think the piece was written really well, and I think that all credit goes to Nathaniel Price for the work that he did on this. And you could tell that he'd done a lot of research, but he wrote it in a way that, I'm going to use it, took you on a journey.
Took you on a yellow brick road.
But he also did a lot of character work with the other characters. Yes, it was about Clayton, but you also knew about what the other struggles were going off in their family. You got to see sort of things.
Well, they were like the scaffolding supporting
they were.
The main event.
Yeah, and it was strong
really.
Scaffolding. I felt that it helped. It helped drive the storyline.
Yes, because he had the issues with his girlfriend, and there was questioning about that, and also there was a little bit of snobbery between people supporting one party and then people supporting the other, one trying to make it as like a hairdresser and so on and so forth, and it highlights a little bit of, how can I say, middle class. I think
it explored those things that would have been happening in 70s families, where there would have been divides on political decisions, or that somebody's doing something right or somebody's doing something wrong. That as much as there would have been people who hated Margaret Thatcher, there would also be people that really liked what she was doing.
At the end of the day, people managed to buy their own homes because of her.
Yes. I mean, albeit that
there was a lot of austerity before she got into power as well.
I mean, albeit that other people did capitalise on those buying their own homes, and some politicians may have made quite a lot of money in that process at the same time.
Yeah.
However, that isn't her decision. That's sometimes the backroom boys that are involved and cause those issues. But I think it gives you sort of balance in thought process between two worlds, where the 70s was a very almost disjointed country. Not everybody knew
we
what
never
to
went
think.
down the whole road path of like Alf Garnett banging on his soapbox about voting one way or the other. You understood where they were coming from, and then the
counter argument was just as
balanced. Good,
was,
but it made you think without it being an issue.
Yes,
no one
definitely.
took sides, and that's, I think sometimes that's what we need right here, right now, in this political climate.
It had the ability
people
to.
that are just spiteful and nasty.
I think the way it was written, it had the ability to make you sort of step back and see it from both sides. And also, one thing I thought it was pitched really well, where Clayton didn't really talk about the things that he was experiencing with his coach and the grooming that was happening, because you didn't talk about things like that. It was
it was mirroring the issue with his father, of his father going through something which was slightly unexplained, but you knew there was a backstory there, because he possibly made stuff up. You think he was making stuff up, because then Clayton was making stuff up as well about this woman that he
definitely. It's almost like
it
was almost the disconnect of son and the dad not really talking much about life, and that's what happened a lot, and it still happens today.
Yes, well, this was a phenomenal piece of writing. It was thought-provoking, it was very powerful and emotive, and it was gripping. It was all the way through. Cleverly written.
You were enthralled throughout the whole piece, and you could almost shut your eyes and listen to the writing, and you were there. You were taken in to the piece. You were with that family and seeing what was happening. And I think that's where the set lent itself to the way it was done. It took you there. You didn't need all the rooms or the this or the that, and you didn't need all the extra bits because it was there.
This was very stripped back. Focus on the story.
And it was and in a way it was a quick production, as in I'm not saying it wasn't a long production and it wasn't worth your money. It was a production that was slick. There was not really any time for when something finished, something else started, and I think that was the key.
And also we've gone quickly over the scene changes, and actually I need to point out the fact that the scene changes, when it transitioned from one to the other, they played music of the time. So when it went back to 76 or went to 79 or whatever, like on one particular bit, all the cast on stage were basically doing like the Jackson 5.
Yeah. It was almost like the vocal warm-up behind stage before they come on and perform. They were doing movement warm-ups in between each scene.
But that was exciting.
It was
and
good
fun
because it worked. And
it was only about 30 seconds.
Yeah, it was almost like you could see them bop in the lounge or in the kitchen, just to music playing, and then snap back into the production. And I think that's what made it snappy and just really good. So we've gone from the end of the first half where the balls have dropped, and that was a scene where it was actually quite awkward for the audience to see, because the final scene ended with the coach basically grooming Clayton in the coach's bedroom.
Yeah.
So, well, in the coach's spare bedroom, really. And it was done in such a way where I think this is where the writing really helped.
Yes.
Fill your
Yeah.
mind with how almost sick, but it was just done in such a way that
It used a particular writing style which made you, the audience, physically be there, seeing.
you almost felt like you were that person
what was
sat there.
happening, because they described what was happening, like take your top off and then do this, do
Yeah,
that.
it was very descriptive.
controlled.
It was very descriptive, and
Whilst the other person just stood there,
yeah,
we
It
just
was- we
listened to what was happening.
It painted such a picture in your
Yeah.
mind, and as awkward and sickening as that picture was, it really made you know exactly what that felt like, and but it was really sensitively done.
Yeah, because it's
where-
all in the mind. You don't have to show what you're doing,
no,
because
not at all.
maybe amateur productions or some production people doing this, they would have just actually done that scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Without thought,
Yeah.
without sensitivity.
Yeah.
They would have just done it because it says do it.
Yeah, exactly. They would have read the words on the page and done that. But I think this was done in such a really... Because we'll talk about the way that it was acted later, but I think this one, it needs a special mention on the writing, purely because the words said everything
Yeah.
in this.
But for us to understand that
Yes.
and to accept that that's happening, you have to have the setup for this payoff. So
Definitely.
bear with me. And we got to see that in Act 1, where he was testing out kicking his balls, or kicking the ball, I should say. So when he was doing all these tricks, kicking up into the
Yeah.
air, doing the header, and then
Yeah.
this way, that way, and whichever way he was doing it, I don't know the terminology of football,
No,
but
you're doing
he
really
didn't
well.
do it on stage, but he said, along with the coach,
Yeah.
they just passed the ball from one to the other in time, and then it was like a header, and then to the side, then to the left kick, then a right kick, and then
this was
whatever
all-
it was,
Yeah.
and that made you understand that, okay, so this particular directed scene here, they're not doing it physically, so we
No.
don't see it, but we mentally see it because they're telling us this is what's happening.
But also
So
that was...
sets up, that builds
Yeah.
it up for this intimate, sensitive scene,
And it
so
also,
we know that that's
it
coming.
also builds up the abuse, because not all abuse is sexual, not all control is sexual. It's the precursor to that act, and there was moments where the sort of repetition and the what you've just talked about, where they were talking about repeating after each other. It's almost like putting the person in a trance to make them sort of almost
do as I say, do as I say,
strangely fall in love with
Yes.
that their coach and see them as that caregiver.
It's like a father figure
Yeah,
as well, because the
because-
father was slightly neither here nor there,
Yeah.
being busy working or whatever he was
Exactly.
doing with these black bags.
Yeah, and the other thing was there was a couple of scenes where coach tickled or touched Clayton. It was a non-sexual way.
It was an
but
over-friendly
it was
way.
it was over-friendly, but it was the beginning of something more sordid and more awkward and disgusting,
Well,
really. And I think
Building
that's
up the trust
yeah.
between two people,
Yeah,
basically.
But and I think that in the writing was really well. It came through really well. That's where you were took, because in the interval when you sat and thought about that, you realised what was actually happening and how they'd drawn you into that final scene before the interval.
This is exactly right, because when we were watching it, in the interval, you said to me, you saw them hold hands when they were sat together.
Yeah.
I didn't see them hold hands, but what
No.
I did say to you was, there's something between them. Something's going
Yeah.
on there. That, you know, there was like an underplay. And I didn't know anything about this play. I didn't
No.
know what it was about or anything. You know, I had no idea it was about abuse.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
But I actually, for the start, I thought, is this like a gay love story? What's going
Yeah.
on here?
Yeah.
But that's because clearly they built up over several different scenes this interplay.
Yes.
And for me to actually think there's something there just shows how good how
Yeah,
strong
exactly.
the writing is, and
Yeah.
how well it was acted
Yeah.
to bring those subtle, nuanced moments, those little touches.
Yeah, and I think what you sort of saw in the second half of the production in Act 2 was this get more chaotic and more obvious that there was a lot of interplay.
It was building up to the climax.
Because obviously the first climax was the first act where the touching happened, and the finale of the first act was the releasing of the balls, the sort of awakening almost of Clayton.
Also, there was a foreshadowing within the first scene with the
Yes.
little boy sucking a lollipop.
Yes, exactly. But it was done so subtly that you wouldn't have even
Well, we all
realised.
laughed at it.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's hilarious.
Yeah, and then when you sit back and go, actually, no, that was actually
yeah.
quite disturbing. But in the second half, what you
Because the
sort
father
of...
knew, you know.
Yes.
He knew.
Yeah. In the second half, it was more present day most of the time. They didn't really regress in the second half because the coach was very much back in Clayton's life. And there was a scene where he was getting back with his girlfriend at one point, and this was modern day where coach was back. But what they created was, in the second half, the coach was always with him wherever he was on stage. So Clayton had this shadow of the coach to show that because of the abuse he went through in his childhood by the coach, he was always there. And there was a scene where there was another repeat of the holding hands scene where the girlfriend was trying to get Clayton to go to bed with him, and it ended in a blackout with him holding the hand again of the coach, because there's been research and there's been things looked into where abusers and those that are abused still have feelings for each other, however strange and unusual that is, because of what they've been through, because it was such an intimate part. It affects the rest of their lives, and there's always going to be that moment that reminds them. And I think they really did that really well in the second half, where it was an unspoken moment where they must have been written into the script, and that coach was there. And it was very hard for him to get rid of that, and it influenced his decisions on his life and his things but he wouldn't talk about what was having that effect, and because then he led to him falling out with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend not realising that actually it was his shadow or his darkness that was caused by this coach that was influencing every decision he made. But he didn't know how to express it, because in the 70s and 80s people didn't do it, and they don't do it now. They talk about the stiff upper lip and the British way, and that still happens now. People don't openly talk about their feelings, and they don't talk about what they've been through because it's easier to ignore it. So I think that it explored that a lot more as well.
When it came to the end of the play, right, so I was with it up to the final 5 minutes, where through clever writing we'd been on this journey along with this football player, and we understood through the cleverness of the writing the either the innuendo or the subtle references. And
I think there was one thing that I found: the final moment with his mum and Clayton, where his mum asked, what happened between you and your coach? That never got an answer, but I think that was a really poignant moment where everything had sat in her mind and she realised something had happened. And it was a moment that it made every mother questions if something's happened in their son's life that they'd not told them about. And I think that showed you the undoing of all those sort of stiff upper lips, all those thoughts. It was just that moment of other people in the family who'd start to realise something's gone off in Clayton's life.
Yeah, and then he said something along the lines of, it wasn't until my mother passed when I was able to tell my story. And I was with it right up until that moment, because the story, it
was almost like the perfect ending until...
So because of the clever writing, and along with the subtext and the symbolism of it, it was a clever piece of writing. So then when it ended, I felt it should have ended on a clever note, because we knew what was going on. We'd witnessed this journey, we'd followed, we understood, we're not stupid. But then I felt that maybe the writer took the easy and obvious way out, which was to go soapbox, start being preachy, do a PowerPoint presentation and say to the audience, this is what happened, these are how many people were abused, this happened, that happened in today's cases, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's when it takes you out of the actual play. And there's a real cleverness in just allowing the audience to feel it, to know it, to be part of it, and to leave it with them. Because the audience are not stupid. If they've got anything about them, they will take everything on board. They will absorb it through osmosis of just watching this show. Everyone got the references. And by doing that, taking that easy option of basically explaining what the play was about, you sort of undermine every clever bit of writing you have done. And so for me, it was like, you've just undone all your good work in a few extra lines.
Yeah, it was almost like a moment of, I've now got to answer all those questions people leave the auditorium with. It was like, I've got to fill the gap. And it's like, you've got to leave the production at a really confident point that people will then go and research, or go and want to know more, or go and want support, because some people sat in the room might have experienced that and not realised that's what it was. And you don't always need to explain what's happened. You've got to leave it at a really strong point, and then let them to want more.
I think the creative team probably just wanted to go out on a powerful ending.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a powerful ending. However, I think it just compromised the writing by being too on the nose, in your face. This is how it is, because when plays go from being really clever to then ending on a bit of a lecture, even if this is real life, which it is.
Yeah.
To then go to lecturing mode, it just insults the audience. We get it, we know it, and it would have been a better ending, perhaps, if he'd have just simply said, when his mother died, that's when
in 2004 I was able to talk about
2006 or whatever it was. That I was then able to let you all know my truth,
my story, and then
my story, my truth.
And then
powerful ending, and powerful word, and that's it. We know, we get it.
I still like the point where he turned to the audience and said something, but then it carried on. And I think that was the issue. It should have just stopped, and it should have just been a simple full blackout. Leave people to go, oh my God, I need to now look into this more, because there's a lot of press out there. There's a lot of things to read. It doesn't take you much to actually find all these stories that he talked about. It would leave you, I mean, even if they wanted to hand people support cards on the way out or something to actually, if they wanted that, they could take it with them.
If they wanted to be a little more powerful, they could have just ended, as I said, maybe turn like a blackout, and then just had voiceovers of all the maybe the victims, or people imitating people saying, I'm such and such, and I was one of the abused victims, or have so many victims, different voices maybe, or something. I don't know. Just for it to have ended the way it did, just left me a little bit irritated and cold, because it was a great piece of writing, a great play. I really think this will tour.
It deserves to tour.
It will go on, but personally, I don't like lecture theatre at the end.
No, and I think there's less is more has got so much going for it, and it's having the confidence to just go, that's the end. That's it.
You don't need to spoon feed your audience every little detail.
No, and I think that would make it even stronger as a performance, because overall the production is brilliant.
Yeah, well, people might, if they did think, what was that about, they'll Google it and research it.
Exactly, and that's
my God, that was about that. Oh, of course, and then it'll be like,
so
that
many
was
other
really
productions
clever
out there that do that, and they leave you questioning, and that's the whole point. You've done your job as a writer if people go away and want to know more.
Because if they go away feeling like they've been educated in terms of this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened.
You don't need to do anything else.
Well, they don't need to do any research then. They can just reel off what they've just been taught.
It's like being told the ending of a book or a big long story or something like that, and it could have led you to just think, you know what, I need to think about that, or I need to reflect on that. And I think it was just a little off, but the overall writing was great.
Yeah, really good. Well done, Nathaniel Price, on that one.
Definitely.
Let's just talk about the directing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this play was directed by Jeff James. And how did you feel that with the direction?
I think there was a lot of energy and a lot of pace.
Yes.
I do think Jeff must have worked really closely with the writer, because you could tell that the production had had a lot of work, and I don't know if it must have been a creative process. I feel that this was something they must have worked together on.
Oh, I definitely think they would have done at the Nottingham Playhouse. They would have
definitely
worked as a team.
And it showed, because it had so much pace, so many dynamics, and so many movements,
and they all knew how to kick a ball properly.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Stuff like that.
And they were kicking balls on steps. I mean, I'm not being funny. It wasn't even a flat piece of.
I'll get anxiety if I had to perform with a bloody ball.
And there wasn't one ball that fell in the audience at any point. I don't think.
Maybe a few when they all got dropped. Yes, but no, they were.
But I think that he directed it really well and really cleverly, where every cast member knew what they were doing, even to the point of the young young child on stage, because they changed them every couple of performances, and every step was used. Every part of the stage was used. Nobody stopped with their performances. If they needed to do their part, they did it, and there was a lot of really clever movements, use of different parts of the stage.
There were proper thought out movements, and they knew.
Even like I said earlier, the scene changes were just brilliant.
Yes.
You know, and that would have been inspired, and they just maybe just thought, well, while we do it in a warm up, let's do it as a scene change, and it worked because it was distraction enough to clear your mind almost to then move on to the next scene. It was enough to just shake the floor a little, get you ready for the next piece, and then do it again.
Yeah, there was a lot of movement there, and I think the strong points about the direction is those intimate moments of seduction.
Because there wasn't really a lot of blackouts or lighting changes to show a different scene. It was purely the movement of the people on stage that created
Did they have like a disco ball effect come down for when they were doing the scene changes, but they did it to like Jackson 5?
Yeah, but there was moments where they sort of dimmed the lights, but they never really went completely black. Everything was.
I think it went.
It was
colourful,
almost.
I think
it was very. You could see everything happening, and I think that's a confidence in a director as well, that they trust the cast to do that.
Yeah,
it wasn't a traditional stop scene, move on to the next one, blackout, move on to the next one, blackout. It was a fluid piece of staging, because then that also lent itself to the 45 minutes each half, and those sort of parts where it felt like a football match, because the football match is a drama. There's a lot of there's a lot of give and take in a football match, so it's it's a game of two halves, and that's what they made it feel like.
Yeah. Moving on. Do you know what we're here for? We're
here for the drama.
So Richard, we've only just touched the surface of this little incident.
So far in.
Shall we discuss it at length?
I think we need to discuss.
Bearing in mind, we must say now, we saw it on its first night, Wednesday the 7th.
Night.
So of course there was going to be nerves. I was nervous.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially with all them balls.
Exactly. What I'd like to say is I think it was superbly cast. Nobody was miscast in the production. I think everybody had the right role for their age group, their family makeup. Each person felt like they were in that time period and that production, and I think that was really well done.
And they all had a reason to be there.
Yeah,
even
definitely.
If we go so far as like the uncle,
yes,
and the girlfriend, obviously they're there for support of the narrative, which is the story.
You got people in there that have performed on a lot of stages and done a lot of theatre. I think Claire Goose people will know, and
I didn't know any of them.
I mean, in the production you've got Nicholas Bailey, who's done a lot of theatre and a lot of television. Neil Craig equally done a lot of theatre and a lot of television, and Claire Goose also, that's done a lot of theatre and a lot of television and films and things that you almost forget these people also love to act on stage and want to do theatre, because it's not just about the television or the film, it's also about the raw, just performing. And maybe it was good that they'd got seasoned performers to be part of a new piece of writing, and it must be exciting for the cast to actually be involved in that. I mean, Raphael hasn't really done a lot of theatre himself. Raphael played Clayton, and I think it was key in a way that you didn't know him. And I think it was good that you didn't familiarise yourself with somebody, because I think for this production it helped, because you believed that they are these people.
The show we saw, it had Taden Fairhall in it as Courtney, and he was my standout performer.
Yes. Talk about on the ball.
And the energy.
Oh.
Obviously he's a little lad, so obviously he's going to have a lot of energy, but that's the professionalism within that kid.
Yeah, definitely.
He's definitely going to go far in this industry.
But there was a brightness in his performance, but also a confidence and a
charm, a charisma.
Yeah, you didn't feel like he was any less a performer than the rest of them. And for a child performer, there's a tendency to have smiles and the glitz and the glam, whereas he just became Clayton's brother, and you believed...
Like a cheeky chappy.
Yeah, it's just a cheeky lad.
Probably down to the writing as well.
But the scenes that they taught him where he maybe needed to be angry or different or have an opinion or have that teenage moment, they were all there where you just felt that he was real. and I think that's a credit to him, because he must have done a lot of work and a lot of preparation to do that, and I think it showed in his performance. One thing I suppose we need to really talk about is the hairdressing scene.
Yeah. It didn't bother me up until like a minute into the silence when I started getting anxiety and I started sweating.
Yeah. So the hairdresser
Really
scene was basically a moment where the mum and Clayton's girlfriend was a hairdresser, and there was a scene where Clayton's girlfriend washes his mum's hair in the hairdressers, where they had a big bucket of water, which I think was really done well. She had her head back, having her hair washed. It was all going well. Then there was a pause, and it wasn't just a pregnant pause. It became longer and longer and longer. And that hair was very well washed.
And then I didn't know who actually forgot their lines, because even though the hairdresser then picked it back up again, you assume she's the one that dropped the ball.
Yeah.
But we don't know if she's trying to save it and move on, because maybe there was a couple of pages missing.
I feel like there was more than a free kick.
Yeah, we don't know who dropped the ball on that one. It was really awkward. But
I don't think any referee could have saved them from it, really.
No, even the lady in front of us, she was getting a bit angsty as well.
Yeah, I think we all started to notice.
Very audible. I was getting a sweat on, and my stomach was churning butter.
And then Clayton's girlfriend said a line, and it got them back on the road, and they got back where they needed to be. But
thankfully, she didn't say, "Have you been anywhere on your holidays lately?"
I think it was.
Are you going Marbella?
It was so close to it. I mean, luckily they got back on track and off they went, and it was. And I think the other thing, what was also happening, to explain in this scene, the uncle was also painting the message on Margaret Thatcher's
face. Yes,
and he went over the thing that every letter that he painted on Margaret Thatcher's face, he had to keep going over. Over. It was very well painted by the end of the piece.
He did well.
He did well balancing on that ladder for all that time
that
as well.
Out. Yes, but that must have been awful for them, especially the first night.
And it didn't take anything away from the production. I think it was for people that have worked in theatre and done productions and seen people struggle. You noticed that it was that.
I think everybody noticed. That's how long the pause was, Richard.
Yes.
They were almost going to start wheeling out the ice creams in that 5 minutes.
Yeah, they could have made some money.
Yeah, but I'm not going to hold it against.
I mean, I don't hold it against.
I've been there myself. Yeah. I was on stage and I went in to do this complete monologue. All I can remember now was something to do with going to Sainsbury's with the kids. And it was Memory of Water, and I completely forgot this monologue, and I was like sweating. I didn't concentrate before going on to do this bit, and I just kept saying, "I'm sorry." It's like, I'll never live that down. That's probably why I don't act.
I think productions I've done, productions I've been involved in, and productions I've directed. One thing, my biggest theatre bugbear is a prompt. I hate.
Imagine if someone shouted from the wings.
If we'd have heard somebody's line shouted from the wings,
or she'd have said,
that would have done it
line.
For me. Yeah. For me, if you're a character on stage, you've just got to use a way to get yourself out of that. Even if you've got to just completely skip 3 pages of a production, it gets you back on track. And rather than breaking that performance by somebody shouting from the rafters,
it didn't work for me. I mean, I didn't shout line or anything like that, but someone just came in with an extra line. And thankfully, because it was a monologue, they could do that. But my goodness.
I mean, you feel so horrible for them, because you know that there's so much going through their mind at that point.
But I'm so pleased in a way, because I know, and I've seen a couple of plays now where it's been a bit dicey on a lot of professional actors' faces, where they're where they are on the page.
Yeah, they know.
So thankfully, if I, a mere humble peasant,
I mean, I'll give them the dues. They stayed in character.
Yeah, I won't be so hard on myself, but I'm quite relieved that a professional show did it. Not like I'm sort of enjoying.
It gives you a comfort blanket,
Yeah, but no. Bless them. But they got out of it in the end, finally.
And it didn't change the storyline. It was still all strong.
No, we just cracked on, didn't we? Right, let's talk about the props now. And there's a couple of props we need to mention. Now, there was a moment within this play. I suppose this could come down to the writing as well as the directing here. I don't know if this was picked up, but we mentioned about the black bags being on the stage. Now, within the play, there's talk about thievery going on, Now, I feel that I'm led to believe that possibly the father was stealing, and that's probably what was in the black bags. But whenever he was talking about work, he was a steel worker, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah,
So
it
he was using that, the black bags, just moving them up and down the stage. Now, I can't work out if that was good or not, or what the point was, because I think something's maybe have been left out, because if
Yes.
it was the case where the father's actually stealing to make money because he's not actually got a job anymore because of being on strike, then that would have made sense why he's got stuff in black bags
Yeah,
that we
you saw
never
us-
actually see.
Yeah, they were used to take to the back of stage, but
It was used to give him something to do.
they weren't really referenced.
Exactly. Unless
We knew he was working in the steel works, and
But
this,
if you
that, and
weren't
the other.
there, why would you have black bags?
But they
unless you were
never
the
got
bin man?
anything out of the bags, and
No.
I think that for me, yes, they used the prop, but what was in them? Because
Exactly.
it felt a little strange. Like you say, it was like had they edited something out that then meant they got no reference.
Yeah, because why would you have steel in the black bags?
Yeah. Well, we didn't even know if there was steel, and they looked heavy, but they never actually fetched anything out of them.
Yeah.
And for me, it would have been even more clever use to have something in that was used for one of the scenes in the second half or at the end of the first half where they had a complete different other use. Because I think that would have made it even more clever, whereas it just felt like you were just dragging some black bags around stage. And even if they'd have referenced them for, say, his wife saying, "Are you taking the rubbish out yet?" And they could have took them off stage as rubbish bags or something to show that they were there for a reason. But it didn't.
Maybe she did say that.
But
We're
they
gonna-
still
I'm gonna have to
stayed
get
on
the
stage, though.
script
They
to read
stayed
it,
on
but-
stage, and it just felt a little strange.
Yes, however, with the directing of getting the uncle to write across Margaret Thatcher's face,
Yes.
that was quite clever. And this is
It
again
was,
what I'm saying
yeah.
about the writing as well. Everyone was laughing when they were writing, let her eat, and it went. And at the moment he were painting S, everyone were thinking it was going to be
Yeah.
excrement, basically. But no, when he then put ST, everyone was a bit, oh, what's that? What's he writing? What
Yeah.
could that be?
Exactly.
That, everyone went from a laughter to then,
What's going
what?
on?
What's that
Yeah.
about? He spelt shit wrong.
Yeah, exactly. but I think it was really well done. Because I didn't think that Margaret Thatcher would be the picture would have been used, but actually it turned out that it was part of a political protest, which I thought was done really well. Because while one scene was happening, the uncle was basically stood on a ladder for the whole time, painting this speech, this saying on the actual picture.
And also, when they went to use the record player,
Yes.
there was a scene where the dad threw the record player down the stadium
Yeah, it
steps,
was in
which is in
anger.
the home
Yeah.
in anger, and it hit the banister.
It hit the railings, didn't it?
Yeah.
And
Hopefully it was attached to something, because that was
Yes.
another health and safety issue. Because I thought,
Yes.
oh my good lord, if that comes flying into the audience,
yeah, and
it'd be another lawsuit.
they threw it in it was thrown, and I don't know if it was meant to end up where it did, but it was ended up in a little bit of an awkward location, so they had to almost climb round it at certain occasions. So I don't know if it was meant to fly further down the stage than it actually did, because it
And
got
if
a
it
bit
was-
wrapped around things.
See,
at one
that's
point.
it. If it wasn't, then how can they stop it falling into the front row?
Exactly.
So it must have been on some sort of cable.
Yeah, it must have had some sort of restriction
Friction.
to stop it falling further.
And okay, fine, he threw it down. It sort of, it's supposed to have been broken, but anyway, or whatever, it was
Yeah.
there. But then in the next,
It was in the second half.
Yeah,
It
no,
was-
not in the next scene, but whenever the scene was at the back in the house, no one put the record player back to how it should be.
No.
So the little kid was there on the game, playing the game or watching TV
Yeah.
or whatever he was doing with the headphones.
He
on
probably
as
was
well,
listening to music when he
listening to music.
Yeah, it was.
But is that like a dodgy angle? And then when that's right, because the hairdresser went to turn the music on
Yes,
for that scene, but it was the same record player,
and it was on
obviously.
the floor on its side.
Yeah, so
But-
if they'd have turned that around on the side, so it could have had two uses. Like this is a radio for the hairdressers, but when it's outright, this is where it's at home.
yeah, one of the things that would have made it better was in the 70s you couldn't afford to replace furniture like you do now. You couldn't go out and buy another DVD player or another CD player or things like that. You made do and mended, and you would have put that sideboard or that record player back where it came from. It wouldn't have stayed there throughout your life. I think they could have been reset in the interval, or the parents could have, or the parent and the son could have lifted it back into place.
Well, exactly. They could have done that whilst whilst Raphael, what's the character's name?
Clayton.
While Clayton was doing his thing, they could have reset.
His mum could have made them got them to help put it back.
Because
if
if the uncle can move the ladders in the back and paint and stuff, then they can easily just move that record player.
And I think there was also
father.
For me, it didn't help. There was one scene where Courtney was being basically listening to music to distract himself from Clayton and his girlfriend up in their bedroom, and Courtney was told to just go downstairs and listen to music because they wanted to have some alone time together. And because this record player was on its side, tipped up, this, that and the other, he had to sit with his back to it with his headphones on. Now, the scene would have been more poignant if that radio was up and level, because then he could have sat more centre stage and you would have seen him better, because I think he ended up sitting behind the railings with his back to the audience, and as much as you could just about see his headphones, it just detached from that
also,
scene.
Because he was under the railings, that brought the railings into the living room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it felt, even if they'd have stood it up in front of the railings to be part of, to move it there.
Well, it was only like 3 steps away from the back anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So. And
one of the other things I'd like to mention, there was also a phone on the back of the stage,
which was green
and hidden onto the wall, almost like it was a bit incognito. So you thought, was it going to be used? But we'll talk about that in the sound effects.
Moving on to our final segment.
What the tech is this?
What did we think about the use of the sound, the lighting, and the special effects within this production? First touch.
As we've talked before, the sound effects, the music was very of the time of the production, and it was very well selected, and it had all the right little moments that took you back to 1974, 1976, then to 79. You knew where you were.
All upbeat as well.
Yes. It was all, because it's such a heavy subject we're discussing, and I think it's so key to have distractions within that, to just, I think, cleanse your palate a little bit.
Gives you different levels.
Yes.
If you could have a high and then the next you get a low, so then you've got a journey yourself of your emotions.
And they also use some crowd noises and things, football noises and things in the background to make the space bigger, but it was all done subtly. There was no real big sound effect moments, but I think that was really key.
And also there was no calm, wishy-washy emotional music as well, because I think had they used,
there was no macabre, it was just
well, if they had something sentimental, if they had sentimental music, I think that would have made the writing or the dialogue seem a little bit soap opera.
Yes.
Melodrama.
Yeah. It would have been more. It wouldn't have been as strong a piece if it had too many songs that would have almost fueled the things that were happening.
I think it's because we're being taught, or we're being shown as an audience what's happening without the need for violins.
Yes, exactly. And in that world, in that 70s world, people did distract themselves with music. They did distract themselves with other things, and I think it gave you that moment as well where all this horrible stuff's happening, but we need to go and listen to music. We need to not think about that. We're going to drown it out. And I think that's what it also gave you, that thought of, let's turn the music up to not think about those things. And I think that helped. One thing that was also, there was not many sound effects. So Coach had a whistle, which gave you the football references, and when he used the whistle, it was a real-time sound effect, because I'm all for naturally made sound effects on stage, the balls being kicked about, the balls being used. They all had those thuds and those sounds that you think about when people are at training camps and football grounds, and if it could be made naturally, why not?
Yeah.
So we move on to, we could talk about the phone now, Stephen, if you want.
Well, I was going to say, with the whole lighting and the sound, I don't really have much to say about that, because I felt that everything worked as it should there was nothing extra. There was nothing
No.
extra for me to say, wow, look at this.
No.
Neither was it bad for me to say,
No.
oh my God, look at that.
It was lit really well.
Yeah,
it felt like a daylight on a nice, bright, sunny day.
Yeah.
There was a few moments where they dimmed the lights to be evening scenes, where they were in bedroom scenes and things like that felt like you were in those rooms. But it wasn't. It was done so subtly where there was
I think
no
that's it, because
real
it was subtly and it was done
blackouts
really well. I've got nothing to comment on it because it's fulfilled.
It was almost a fluid movement with
Yeah.
lighting. It didn't. You never had any harsh chopping and changing effects. It was all very just happened, and I think that's
It was just slick.
Yeah, it was really slick.
Now let's talk about that phone again, Richard.
Yes.
For the sound effects.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, once they all came down the centre aisle and they all got on and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
The phone rang. Okay, fine, we're started.
Yeah.
Who's on the other end of the
Yeah,
line?
who's on the
What's
phone?
going on?
Yeah.
The mother picks it up.
Still
Hello?
ringing.
Still ringing. And then my anxiety starts. Oh my God, already.
Somebody's not pressed the button.
2 minutes into this play, we've already got issues.
Yeah, it's already
I thought,
started. It's like the opening scene, and it's still not going right.
Dare I say it, I thought it was going to be another Red Ellen.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go there. But I actually thought, oh no, here we go. It started so well and now we're going downhill.
But then,
However, cleverly, it was done on purpose.
yeah, and it
wasn't
got louder
And it got
and
louder. Only subtly louder.
Yeah, and it just swelled. The ringing became almost unbearable a little bit in a way.
And it only stopped when Clayton answered it.
It was only stopped when the phone was passed to Clayton.
That's right.
So it only stopped when his mother said on the phone that it was his coach on the phone to speak to Clayton.
Exactly. Now, what I take from that is another little bit of subtext and another little bit of symbolism.
Yeah.
In the fact that everyone's trying to get through to him. Now he is a professional.
Yeah.
Simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's me thinking it was a bit of a sound effect.
Yeah. And actually it was so
Faux pas.
yeah.
And actually, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have done that.
No.
Because
No.
I don't want the anxiety of worrying.
I
like
think
that.
it.
But
I think it.
Yeah,
it-
I get.
I think the sort of purpose of it. The purpose of it was to.
Oh, do you think we've been fooled? Do you reckon it was a mistake and they managed to unstick
No,
the button?
it could have
when
been.
Do you know
It
what
could
I
have
mean?
been,
You
and
never
somebody
know.
leant on the fader
They
and
nodded
turned it all up.
off. Yeah.
I think the purpose of that phone ring was to send you down the lane of Clayton has gone through his professional football career now, 5 years later, putting aside all those things that happened to him in the past. And this was the moment that the coach returned into his life.
Yeah.
And everything came flooding back. And that's why they did what they did.
Now I'm hoping we're intelligent enough to know that that is correct and that's the correct way of
Yes.
doing it. So when it comes to the issue of the hairdressing scene, when they forgot the line,
That must have been intentional.
I'm hoping that we understood that that was a drop of a line
Yes.
and not done specifically to give me anxiety.
I mean, she's got lovely hair now. It's very well washed.
It was very wash and go. She washed and we went.
There was a couple of technical issues that happened on stage, and I don't know if this was in the directing or the cast, where it was meant to be a 45-minute long half for both sides, and in the first half they ran over their 45.
I thought you commented at the time that they were pacing it out a little bit longer.
I think there was maybe a couple of moments where they were pacing out the production a little bit
that's
longer.
why she kept washing her hair.
Yeah,
longer.
that was in the second half. But it's a big risk to have a clock timing you on stage, visible to the audience, and you've got to have so much confidence that production will last 45 minutes. Where it doesn't need to be reset and it doesn't need to be restarted, because in the second half the production actually finished earlier than the 90 minutes. It finished at something like 81 minutes, and with a football match lasting 90 and going overtime,
Yeah.
it felt like, oh, has the ref decided to change the time of a full-length football match? And I think that's the big risk. Even if you had a way to skip it forward a little bit so it always finishes at 90 minutes, I think they struggled. I don't know what technical things they built in, but they struggled to then make it change to 90 minutes, and it just felt like that needed to be either a little bit more rehearsed, or they needed to be more aware of time, or maybe some of the sound changes, the scene changes needed to be slightly longer or shorter just to allocate, make sure they finished on time.
Bearing in mind it was their opening night, so maybe
Yeah.
a lot of nerves maybe got to them. Maybe
they could have been rushing script,
rushing through it,
Yeah.
so they finished early.
Yeah.
Maybe, well, I'm just making excuses now, but we know those pressures of a first night.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. But that was something.
But we're just
noticed,
commenting on what we saw.
Yes,
on the night.
first night. Yeah, on the night. I mean, overall, technically, I can't fault it.
Mm.
I think that, it was just those things that are visible. If things go wrong, they're very noticeable with something like a clock that's timing the production. I think that's. I personally don't like to see clocks anywhere near a stage, because then people don't sit there and go, oh, well, I think it was going to be finished at 9:10 and it's still going on, and you got to remove clocks off a stage.
Yeah, I quite like it sometimes when things do go wrong, although I have to admit my anxiety flares up a little bit, because it's like, oh my god, what's going to happen now?
Yeah.
How are they going to get out of this one?
Yeah.
Now for our ratings, as we say, call this a show. So Richard, final thoughts on this before we give it a score?
I think this production was a massive risk for a writer, and a massive risk for a theatre company to actually put this piece of theatre on, and I think they nailed the writing and the performances of it, and I was really pleased that it was done in such a way that was also sensitive but also hard hitting, and I think that said a lot about how much work they put into it. And for a first night, I can't fault, we had the niggles and the things we've talked about in this podcast, but I don't feel that took it away from the actual performance. It was highly enjoyable, and I would watch it again.
Yes, for me, summing up, I think it was a interesting set. Extremely well written, beautifully written, actually, very cleverly written for a new piece of writing. So I'm always interested about how the writer, this is his first professional
step into the professional
script.
play.
Yeah. So he's done really, really well for this. I'd like to see it go on tour, and I'd like to see it with maybe a different layout of a set in future, just to see
different
how
interpretation.
Just to see how well that goes. But on this production, first night and everything, I can forgive a lot of things, like the dropping of lines and so on and so forth. Yeah, maybe the too many balls on the stage and it looked a bit messy. But overall, it was a good piece of writing, a good piece of theatre, extremely well directed, particularly in those subtle moments that needed to be done. The ending bothered me a little bit, but overall, I would definitely get people to come and see this, and I would absolutely come and see it again. So, scores on the doors, with 10 being a perfect hat trick and 1 being a red card. Richard, what are you going to give this one for the production of First Touch?
I'll give this a 9.
Ooh.
Because it deserves it. I've seen
Okay.
other new writing productions and they've been messy, and I've seen other ones that are really good, and I've seen a lot of things where people have took risks, and for the subject matter I thought it was worth it. And hats off to the amount of effort that went in, because you could see it on stage.
Fair enough. I'm going to score this one an 8.5. I can't give it a 10 simply because I want to be able to see it again, done a little bit more tighter and I want to see if I say a better version, this is going to be like a smack in the face, really. But I'm only being honest.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Okay,
No, it's fine.
The ending nickled
Honesty
me,
is important.
but it's going in the right direction. It's near enough perfection.
Yeah,
this is for the writing, and it's definitely up there.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
and I mean, for me, it makes me want to. If Nathaniel writes something else, I definitely want to see it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That says a lot for me for a script writer. If I see a name, I've got confidence that they know how to write.
Yeah, but for me to give it a 10, that would mean I'm happy with everything and there's nothing to fix. I think there is certain tweaks that would enhance this.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not going to sit around and say this is wonderful, brilliant,
totally
brilliant. Bow to you and whatever, because that's not going to do anybody any favours. I'm just giving my honest opinion.
No, exactly.
Plus, I'm not really that big a football fan, to be fair. But the fact that I actually want to see this again, in a different setting, different actors, or a different way around of doing it, or whatever, I want to be. If it still holds up, then I would give it more.
And I mean, if they need, the other thing is it would be transportable. The only thing they'd have to change is the Derby Nottingham references, but that would easily be done in another place, in another space, so it would work in another setting, so it would have that same work.
Yeah, and this can definitely tour. I hope it does tour.
Yeah, I do.
Honest to God, it's definitely
it's worth it. It's worth
the hard work gone into this as a new piece of writing, and we've seen other new pieces of writing which is going to be coming
are
up,
already touring.
which are exactly, and they just don't compare
This
to
should
this.
have more limelight than others.
Yeah.
You know.
So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck, tumbleweed, an audible shrug of the shoulders, a slow clap, a pleasant applause, or a standing ovation. What will it be? So, Richard, what sound effects are you going to give first touch?
I think it can only be a standing ovation for the amount of work that went in, and I think it deserves it.
I'm going to also give this a standing ovation. I didn't give it 10, but I'm going to give it a standing ovation because it is superb. So well done, everyone involved. So there we are. That's our discussion of First Touch. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Coming up over the next few episodes, we will be discussing the new production of Red Ellen
Ladies of Letters.
and Cluedo. That's it for this week, folks.
If you'd like to drop us a message, please email us at upstagedowstagepod@gmail.com. Remember, you can always join in the chat to share with us your views on a production.
Also, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of Upstage Downstage.